The empty beer bottle in my hand felt heavier than it should have as I stared at my phone, watching Talia's contact photo smile back at me like she hadn't just shattered 15 years of marriage with a single lie. "Girls' night at Abigail's," she'd said, kissing my forehead with those perfectly glossed lips before grabbing her overnight bag, the same bag she'd been packing every Friday for the past 3 months. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I should have known something was wrong when she started buying lingerie from places that cost more than my monthly car payment at the shop. Victoria's Secret bags hidden in her trunk, credit card statements with charges at restaurants I'd never been to, and that new perfume that smelled nothing like the vanilla scent she'd worn since college. But it was the phone call that broke everything wide open. "Hey, Abigail. Sorry to bother you so late," I said, trying to keep my voice casual as I paced around our kitchen. The same kitchen where Talia had made me coffee that morning, humming some song I didn't recognize while texting someone who definitely wasn't me. "Miles? Is everything okay?" Abigail's voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Yeah, just wondering if Talia left her phone charger at your place. Her phone stopped working and she wanted me to grab it tomorrow." The silence stretched for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then Abigail cleared her throat, and I could hear the uncomfortable shift in her voice. "Miles, honey, I haven't seen Talia in months. We had that falling out after book club, remember? She accused me of flirting with Dr. Hales at the hospital fundraiser." Dr. Rowan Hales, Talia's boss, the same pompous asshole who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than most people's rent. The same guy Talia had been mentioning more and more in casual conversation, always with that little smile that should have been my first clue. "Right," I managed, my grip tightening on the phone. "I must have gotten confused. Sorry for waking you." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, finishing that beer and 3 more while the truth settled in my gut like poison. My wife of 15 years, the woman who'd promised to love me through better or worse, was spending her Friday nights in some other man's bed while I sat home like an idiot, believing her lies. I guess Talia's sleepovers were of the co-ed variety. Saturday morning came with the smell of Talia's expensive coffee and the sound of her humming in the shower. She'd stumbled in around 2 a.m., claiming Abigail had gotten a little too wine-happy, and they'd stayed up talking about old times. The lies rolled off her tongue so easily, I almost admired the performance. "Morning, baby," she said, appearing in the kitchen wearing my old flannel shirt and nothing else. Once upon a time, that sight would have made me forget my own name. Now it just made me sick. "Sleep well at Abigail's?" I asked, not looking up from my newspaper. "Like a rock. You know how her guest bed is, though, way too soft. I'm sore all over." She stretched dramatically, and I wondered if Dr. Hales appreciated the show as much as she thought I did. "I bet you are." She paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips, studying my face. "You okay? You seem off." "Just tired. Long week at the shop." I folded the paper and stood up, grabbing my keys from the counter. "I've got to go in early today. Mrs. Peterson's transmission is giving her trouble again." "On Saturday? Miles, you work too much." Coming from the woman who was working overtime on her back, that was rich. But I just kissed her forehead like the dutiful husband I'd been for 15 years and headed for the door. "See you tonight. Try not to have too much fun without me." The drive to Rennick's auto shop took 12 minutes, just enough time for me to run through every stupid, trusting moment of the past 3 months. Every late night at the hospital, every weekend conference, every time she'd come home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. My shop sat on the edge of town like a grease-stained monument to honest work. 3 bays, a small office cluttered with invoices and coffee-stained paperwork, and enough tools to fix anything with an engine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Built it from nothing after high school while Talia went to college and learned how to manage hospital budgets and, apparently, extramarital affairs. The wrench was already there when I arrived, elbow deep in the engine of a '98 Ford pickup. Ricky Vasquez had earned his nickname in high school when he'd used a tire iron to convince Tommy Morrison that dating his sister was a bad idea. 20 years later, he was still the best mechanic I'd ever worked with and the only person I trusted completely. "You look like hell, boss," he said without looking up. "Talia keep you up late?" Something like that. I grabbed a beer from the mini fridge we kept hidden behind the brake fluid and popped it open. 9 a.m. was a little early, even for me, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Want to talk about it?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the contact information for a private investigator I'd found online. "I need you to do me a favor, Ricky, and I need you to keep your mouth shut about it." He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag, and gave me the look that had intimidated half the town since we were teenagers. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that might end my marriage." "About damn time," he muttered, then caught my expression. "Sorry, man, but we both know Talia's been acting strange lately. What do you need?" I explained about the phone call to Abigail, about the lies and the credit card statements and the growing certainty that my wife was sleeping with her boss. Ricky listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with each detail. "So, what's the plan?" he asked when I finished. I pulled a small electronic device from my pocket, something I'd ordered online after too many late nights wondering where my wife really was. "I'm going to find out exactly what she's been up to, and then I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." The listening device was smaller than a quarter, with a battery life of 72 hours and a range of half a mile. I'd also ordered a GPS tracker, equally tiny, equally illegal if used without consent. But after 15 years of marriage, I figured I had some rights. "You sure about this, Miles? Once you go down this road, there's no coming back." I thought about Talia's performance that morning, the fake concern in her voice, the way she'd stretched like she was auditioning for a role in my personal hell. "I'm sure. If they want a show, I'll give them a blockbuster." That afternoon, while Talia was at the grocery store, I slipped both devices into her purse. The listening device went into the small inner pocket where she kept her lip gloss, and the GPS tracker attached to the metal frame of her wallet with a tiny magnet. Simple, undetectable, and completely illegal. I didn't care. By 6 p.m., I was back at the shop with a six-pack, a laptop, and a pair of headphones. Talia had texted to say she was meeting some coworkers for dinner and would be home late. Another lie, but this time I'd be listening. The GPS showed her at the Sandpiper Motel on Route 41, a place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The listening device crackled to life just after 7, and I heard my wife's voice, breathless and excited. "God, I missed you. It's been torture pretending everything's normal at home." "I know, baby. But we have to be careful. If Miles finds out before the divorce is final, it could complicate things." The voice was smooth, educated, with just a hint of an accent that screamed expensive private schools and trust funds. Dr. Rowan Hales in all his arrogant glory. "He won't find out. He's too busy with his little garage to notice anything. Sometimes I think he loves those cars more than me." They laughed together, the sound cutting through me like broken glass. Then the conversation turned to things I didn't want to hear. Intimate details of what they were doing to each other while I sat alone in my shop, drinking beer and planning their destruction. But it was what came after that really sealed their fate. "When are you going to tell him?" Rowan asked, his voice muffled like his face was buried in her neck. "Soon. I've been documenting everything, his drinking, his temper, the way he ignores me. My lawyer says I can claim emotional abuse and get the house, maybe even alimony." "And the shop?" "That too, if we play it right. Miles built that place with money from my father's loan. Technically, I'm part owner." I ripped off the headphones and threw them across the room, watching them shatter against the wall like my marriage, my trust, and any lingering love I'd felt for the woman who'd just signed her own final verdict. Not literally, of course. I wasn't a destroyer. but I was definitely done being the nice guy. Sunday morning brought rain and the kind of hangover that makes you question every decision you've ever made. Talia was already up, making pancakes and humming that same unfamiliar song while she flipped them with practiced ease. The domestic goddess act would have been touching if I hadn't spent the night listening to her plan my financial destruction with her boyfriend. "You were out late last night," I said, accepting the coffee she handed me with a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "Jenny's going through a rough divorce. We ended up talking until almost midnight." Another lie, delivered with the same casual ease as asking about the weather. "You know how it is with girl talk." "Right, girl talk." She studied my face over her coffee mug, those green eyes that had once made me forget my own name, now calculating and cold. "Are you feeling okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Just work stress. You know how it is." "Maybe you should take some time off. We could go somewhere, just the two of us, reconnect." The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. Reconnect with the woman who was planning to take everything I'd worked for and hand it over to her boyfriend? I'd rather reconnect with a rattlesnake. "Can't afford it right now. Business is slow." "Maybe that's a sign, Miles. Maybe it's time to think about selling the shop, doing something different with your life." There it was, the opening move in whatever game she and Rowan had planned. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was already 3 steps ahead of them. "I'll think about it," I said, then kissed her cheek like the loving husband I was supposed to be. "I've got to run some errands. See you later." The first stop was Radio Shack, where I bought 3 more listening devices and a digital recorder small enough to fit in my shirt pocket. The kid behind the counter looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but his boredom worked in my favor. No questions, no memory of the transaction. Stop 2 was the bank, where I quietly opened a new account in my name only and transferred half our savings. Perfectly legal, since both names were on the original account. If Talia wanted to play financial hardball, I'd make sure I had something left to play with. Stop 3 was the most important: Detective Dean Moffat's house. Dean and I had gone to high school together, played football until he blew out his knee junior year, and I decided I was better with engines than playbooks. He'd joined the police force right after graduation, worked his way up to detective, and somehow managed to stay friends with me, despite the fact that his wife thought I was a bad influence. "Miles?" He opened the door wearing a bathrobe and a confused expression. "It's 8 a.m. on a Sunday. This better be good. Can I come in? I need some advice." His kitchen was neat and organized, the kind of place where everything had a purpose and nothing was out of place. The opposite of my shop, where chaos was a way of life and coffee stains were considered decoration. "What's going on?" Dean asked, pouring coffee from a machine that probably cost more than my monthly insurance payment. I told him everything: the phone call to Abigail, the listening devices, the conversation I'd overheard at the motel. Dean listened without interrupting, his cop face giving nothing away. "Jesus, Miles, I'm sorry. I don't want sympathy. I want to know what I can legally do about it. Honestly, not much. The listening devices are illegal without consent, so anything you recorded can't be used in court. The GPS tracking is a gray area since you're married, but a good lawyer could argue invasion of privacy. What about the financial stuff? Her plan to take the shop? That's civil court territory. You'd need a lawyer and a good one. But if you can prove she's planning to defraud you," he shrugged, "there might be options." I pulled out the digital recorder and set it on the table between us. What if I could get her to admit it? On tape, without the illegal surveillance. Dean stared at the device like it might bite him. "What are you planning, Miles?" "Nothing illegal, just a conversation between husband and wife." "Be careful. And whatever you do, don't do anything that could be construed as threatening or intimidating. The last thing you need is a restraining order." "I'm not going to hurt her, Dean. I'm not that kind of guy." "I know, but sometimes good guys do stupid things when they're angry. And you're definitely angry." He was right about that. I was furious, hurt, and more betrayed than I'd ever thought possible. But I was also determined to come out of this with something more than the clothes on my back and a broken heart. The drive back to the shop took me past the Sandpiper Motel, and I couldn't resist pulling into the parking lot. The place looked even seedier in daylight, with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered like a fading heartbeat. Room 237 had a BMW parked outside, license plate Rails 1. Subtle. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching the door, imagining what was happening inside. Part of me wanted to kick it down, to confront them both, and let 15 years of marriage end in a screaming match that would give the other guests something to talk about. But that would be stupid. And despite what Talia apparently thought, I wasn't stupid. Instead, I took pictures. The BMW, the license plate, the room number, the timestamp on my phone showing 10:47 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Then I drove to the shop and started planning. The wrench was waiting for me with coffee and a sympathetic expression that told me he'd been thinking about our conversation yesterday. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Better than expected. I need another favor." "Name it." I handed him a camera with a telephoto lens, something I'd bought years ago to take pictures of classic cars at auto shows and never used. "I need you to follow them, get pictures, times, places, everything." "You sure about this, boss? Seems like you're going down a dark road." "The road was already dark, Ricky. I'm just turning on the headlights." He took the camera and nodded. "What about you? What are you going to do?" I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression I'd managed in months. "I'm going to have a conversation with my wife, and I'm going to make sure she tells me exactly what she's been up to." That evening, Talia came home with shopping bags and a story about spending the day with her sister in the city. More lies, but I let her tell them while I cooked dinner and made small talk about work and weather and everything, except what was really on my mind. After dinner, we sat on the couch watching some romantic comedy she'd picked out, her head on my shoulder like we were still the happy couple we'd pretended to be for the past 3 months. The digital recorder in my shirt pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Talia," I said during a commercial break, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? I mean, really happy with us, with our life together?" She shifted slightly, and I could feel her tension through the thin fabric of her shirt. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one. I've been thinking about what you said this morning about maybe selling the shop, making some changes, but I want to make sure we're on the same page about what we want. I want us to be happy, Miles. I want us to have the kind of life we deserve." "What kind of life is that?" "I don't know. Something more than this." She gestured around our living room, at the furniture we'd bought together, the pictures of vacations and anniversaries and all the moments that had seemed important before I learned they were lies. "Don't you ever want more?" "More what? More money? More excitement? More everything. More passion, more adventure. More than coming home to the same house, the same routine, the same conversations every night." I felt the recorder capturing every word, every inflection, every nail in the coffin of our marriage. "Have you found that somewhere else?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and I could feel her whole body go rigid against mine. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. Have you found more passion, more excitement somewhere else?" She sat up, pulling away from me, her face a mask of indignation that would have been convincing if I hadn't heard her laughing about my stupidity 12 hours earlier. "How dare you ask me that? How dare you suggest that I would—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking a direct question. Are you having an affair?" "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp, too obviously false. "I can't believe you would even think that. So if I hired a private investigator, if I went through your credit card statements, your phone records, your email, I wouldn't find anything suspicious?" Her face went white, then red, then white again. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been paying attention. Something I should have done months ago. She stood up, pacing to the window, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass. I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to defend myself against your paranoid fantasies. Then don't. Just tell me the truth. The truth is that you're a jealous, controlling man who can't stand the thought that his wife might have a life outside of your little garage. The truth is that I'm suffocating in this marriage, in this house, in this pathetic excuse for a life we've built together. I turned off the recorder. I had what I needed. Well, I said, standing up and walking toward the door. At least now we're being honest. Where are you going? To my pathetic garage, to think about what kind of life I deserve. I left her standing in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of 15 years and the echo of words that couldn't be taken back. The moment her confession hit the digital recorder, I knew. I was done being the nice guy. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible, even revenge. I'd spent the night at the shop, sleeping on the couch in my office, and waking up with a crick in my neck and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The recording device sat on my desk like a loaded gun, Talia's voice echoing in my memory. I'm suffocating in this marriage. Well, she was about to get all the air she could handle. The wrench arrived at 7 with coffee and a manila envelope, thick with photographs. Jesus, boss, they're not even trying to be discreet, he said, spreading the pictures across my desk like a poker hand. Same motel, same room, 3 times this week. The images told the story better than any private investigator's report. Talia and Rowan entering the motel together, his hand on her lower back. Talia in the lingerie I'd been paying for, visible through the thin motel curtains. Rowan's BMW parked outside while they spent 2 hours doing things that made my stomach turn. This one's my favorite, Ricky said, pointing to a shot of them leaving the motel. Talia was laughing at something Rowan had said, her head thrown back, looking happier than I'd seen her in years. Taken yesterday afternoon while you were having that heart-to-heart conversation? So while I'd been trying to save our marriage, she'd been celebrating its destruction with her boyfriend. The irony was almost poetic. Good work. Now I need you to do something else. Name it. I pulled out a business card for Pamela Galt, the head of human resources at St. Jude's Hospital. Pam and I had gone to high school together, dated briefly before she decided I wasn't ambitious enough for her taste. She'd married a lawyer, divorced him 5 years later, and spent the next decade climbing the hospital's administrative ladder with the determination of someone who had something to prove. I need you to deliver these to Pam, anonymously. Ricky looked at the photographs, then at me. You sure about this? This is going nuclear. They went nuclear first. I'm just returning fire. After Ricky left, I called Dean Moffat and asked him to meet me for lunch. We sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and nobody paid attention to other people's conversations. I've got the recording, I said, sliding the device across the table. Dean listened to the whole thing, his expression getting grimmer with each word. When it finished, he sat back and shook his head. She's planning to take you for everything you've got. That's what I figured. What are my options? File for divorce first. Beat her to the punch, and get yourself a good lawyer, someone who specializes in contested divorces. Any recommendations? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Sarah Mitchell. She's expensive, but she's a shark. If anyone can protect your assets, it's her. I called Sarah Mitchell from the diner parking lot and made an appointment for that afternoon. Then I drove to the hospital. St. Jude's was the kind of place that tried too hard to look welcoming, with soft lighting and generic artwork that was supposed to be soothing, but just looked cheap. The administrative offices were on the 3rd floor, behind a reception desk staffed by a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I'm here to see Talia Rennick, I said. I'm her husband. She's in a meeting with Dr. Hales. Can I take a message? Perfect. Just tell her I stopped by to drop off something she forgot. I pulled a small gift bag from my jacket, the kind of elegant little package that expensive lingerie stores used. Inside was the black lace teddy I'd found in Talia's dresser, the one with the tags still on it, the one that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Could you make sure she gets this? It's important. The receptionist took the bag with a knowing smile that told me she'd seen this kind of domestic drama before. I'll make sure she gets it right away. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard Talia's voice behind me, sharp with panic and embarrassment. "Miles, what are you doing here?" I turned around slowly, taking in her flushed face, her wide eyes, the way she clutched the gift bag like it might explode. Behind her stood Dr. Rowan Hales, looking like a man who'd just realized his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. "Just returning something you left at home," I said, loud enough for the receptionist and the handful of other people in the waiting area to hear. "Wouldn't want you to be without it." Talia's face went from pink to red to white in the space of 3 seconds. "We need to talk. Privately." "I think we said everything we needed to say last night, don't you?" Rowan stepped forward, trying to look authoritative in his expensive suit and silk tie. "Mr. Rennick, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Doc. Just a husband making sure his wife has everything she needs." I looked directly at Talia, letting her see the knowledge in my eyes, the end of all pretense. "Enjoy your meeting." I left them standing there, surrounded by curious stares and whispered conversations that would be all over the hospital within an hour. The first shot had been fired, and it felt better than I'd expected. Sarah Mitchell's office was in the financial district, all glass and steel and the kind of understated luxury that screamed competence. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with short blonde hair and the kind of direct gaze that made me understand why Dean had called her a shark. "Tell me everything," she said after I'd signed the retainer agreement and written a check that made my bank account wince. I told her about the affair, the recordings, the plan to claim emotional abuse and take half my business. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat handwriting that looked like it belonged in a legal textbook. "The good news is that you've documented everything. The bad news is that some of your evidence was obtained illegally and can't be used in court." "What about the recording from last night?" "That's admissible. One-party consent state, and it was recorded in your own home during a conversation with your spouse." She smiled, and it was the kind of expression that made me glad she was on my side. "We can definitely work with this." "How long will it take?" "To file? I can have the papers ready tomorrow. To finalize? That depends on how much she wants to fight." "She's going to fight, and she's got her boyfriend's money to help her do it. Let her fight. We've got the truth, and that's usually enough." I left Sarah's office feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had allies, a plan, and the beginning of hope that I might come out of this with something more than the clothes on my back. The wrench was waiting at the shop with a beer and a satisfied grin. "How'd it go with the hospital?" he asked. "Better than expected. What about you?" "Mission accomplished. Your friend Pam looked very interested in those photographs." "Very interested." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking beer and listening to the radio, two guys who'd been friends long enough to understand that sometimes the best conversations happened without words. "You know there's no going back from this," Ricky said eventually. "I know." "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" I thought about Talia's face in the hospital lobby, the panic in her eyes, the way Rowan had stepped forward like he could protect her from the consequences of their choices. "I'm sure. They thought I was just a grease-stained loser who'd sit quietly while they destroyed my life. Time to show them what real dirty work looks like." My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Murphy's Diner. Come alone. R." Dr. Rowan Hales wanted a meeting. This was going to be interesting. Tuesday dragged by like a wounded animal, every hour stretching into eternity while I waited for 7 o'clock and whatever pathetic ultimatum Dr. Hales had planned. I spent the day working on Mrs. Peterson's transmission, letting the familiar rhythm of honest work calm my nerves and focus my thoughts. The wrench kept glancing at me like I might explode, which wasn't entirely unreasonable. I felt like a pressure cooker with a faulty valve, all that anger and betrayal building up with nowhere to go except straight at the people who'd earned it. "You want me to come with you tonight?" he asked around 4, wiping his hands on a rag stained with 20 years of automotive fluids. "No, this is something I need to handle alone." What if it's a trap? What if he's planning something? I almost laughed. What's he going to do? Perform surgery on me with a butter knife? The man's a coward, Ricky. Cowards don't set traps, they make deals. What kind of deals? The kind where they offer me money to go away quietly while they ride off into the sunset with my wife and half my assets. And you're going to tell him to go to hell? In so many words. At 6:30, I locked up the shop and drove to Murphy's Diner, arriving 15 minutes early so I could choose my seat and watch Rowan make his entrance. He showed up at exactly 7, looking around nervously before spotting me in the back corner booth. He was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'8" in expensive shoes, with the kind of soft build that came from years behind a desk and weekend golf games. His suit probably cost more than I made in a month, but it couldn't hide the fact that underneath all that polish was just another middle-aged man having a midlife crisis with someone else's wife. "Mr. Rennick." He slid into the booth across from me, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the menu. "Thank you for meeting me. Call me Miles. We're practically family now, aren't we?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking my wife was at book club when she was actually getting a different kind of education. But we've cleared that up now. The waitress appeared with coffee and the kind of curious expression that meant she recognized drama when she saw it. I ordered pie, he asked for water, and we sat in uncomfortable silence until she left. "Look," Rowan said, leaning forward like he was about to share state secrets. "I know how this must look, but it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're sleeping with my wife, planning to help her take me for everything I've got, and now that you've been caught, you want to make some kind of deal." His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "How did you—" Never mind. The point is, this doesn't have to get ugly. It's already ugly, Doc. The question is how much uglier it's going to get. He pulled out his phone and showed me a picture of a check, made out to me for $50,000. "This is what I'm prepared to offer you. To walk away. Clean break, no contest divorce, no public scenes." I stared at the number. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. Enough to start over somewhere else and pretend the last 15 years had never happened. "That's generous," I said. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You sign the divorce papers, take the money, and disappear. Talia gets the house, you keep the shop, everybody walks away with something. And you get the girl. I get a chance at happiness with someone who actually wants to be with me." The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or property or even infidelity. This was about erasing me completely, rewriting history so that I became nothing more than an inconvenient first husband who'd had the good grace to disappear quietly. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, cutting into my pie with deliberate precision. "I might have considered it a week ago. Might have taken your money and slunk away like a beaten dog, grateful for whatever scraps you threw me. And now? Now I know what you really think of me. What she really thinks of me. And I've decided I don't like it very much." Rowan's confident expression began to crack around the edges. "What do you want?" "I want you to suffer the way I've suffered. I want everyone in this town to know what kind of man you really are. I want your reputation destroyed, your career ruined, and your precious BMW filled with concrete. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. I leaned forward, matching his earlier posture, letting him see 15 years of rage compressed into a smile that probably looked more like a snarl. You picked the wrong man to screw over, Doc, and you're about to find out why. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Rowan's voice, higher and more desperate than before. You don't know who you're dealing with. I have friends, connections, influence in this town. I turned back, and the entire diner had gone quiet, everyone watching our little drama play out like dinner theater. So do I said loud enough for everyone to hear. The difference is, mine are real. The parking lot was dark and empty except for our two vehicles, my battered pickup truck and his pristine BMW. I walked slowly around the BMW, admiring its perfect paint job, its spotless chrome, its custom leather interior visible through the tinted windows. Then I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side door, carving a deep scratch from headlight to taillight. Rowan burst out of the diner just as I finished, his face purple with rage and indignation. You crazy snake! That's a $60,000 car. Was, I corrected. Now it's a $60,000 lesson in consequences. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Tell them how you were meeting with the husband of the woman you're sleeping with, trying to buy him off so you could steal his wife and half his business. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. He pulled out his phone, then seemed to realize how that conversation would go and put it away again. This isn't over, he said. You're right about that. It's just getting started. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through town, past the hospital where Talia worked, past the motel where they'd been meeting, past all the places where my marriage had faded without me knowing it. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, Talia's car nowhere in sight. Another sleepover at Abigail's, no doubt. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to stay with my sister for a few days. We need space to think about what we both want. T. What I wanted was simple. I wanted them to pay for what they'd done to me. I wanted justice, revenge, and the satisfaction of watching their carefully constructed fantasy crumble into dust. What I wanted was war, and tomorrow I was going to start fighting it. Wednesday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Pam Galt called at 8 a.m., her voice tight with professional outrage and personal satisfaction. Miles, I need to see you. Today. Can you come to the hospital? What's this about, Pam? Let's just say some interesting photographs came to my attention yesterday, and I think you'll want to hear what I've learned. An hour later, I sat in Pam's office, surrounded by the kind of corporate artwork that was designed to inspire confidence, and instead just looked expensive. She was exactly as I remembered from high school, sharp, ambitious, and absolutely ruthless when someone crossed her. I'll cut right to the chase, she said, sliding a manila folder across her desk. Your wife and Dr. Hales have been using hospital resources to conduct their affair. Company credit cards for motel rooms, hospital vehicles for personal transportation, and falsified timesheets to cover their absences. I opened the folder and found copies of credit card statements, vehicle logs, and security camera footage showing Talia and Rowan leaving the hospital together during work hours. This is enough to fire them both, I said. It's enough to destroy them both. Dr. Hales is married. Did you know that? 3 kids, wife who volunteers at the children's hospital, pillar of the community. This would ruin him. What do you want in return? Pam smiled, and it was the kind of expression that reminded me why we'd broken up in high school. Nothing from you. But I've been waiting 5 years for a reason to get rid of Hales. He's been blocking my promotion to chief administrator, claiming I don't have enough collaborative leadership skills. Turns out, his collaborative skills extend to collaborating with married subordinates. So what happens now? Now I present this evidence to the board of directors and recommend immediate termination for both employees involved. Talia loses her job, her pension, and any chance of working in hospital administration again. Hales loses his position, his reputation, and probably his medical license when the state board reviews his conduct. And you get your promotion. I get what I've earned, just like they're going to get what they've earned. I left the hospital feeling like I'd just recruited a general for my army. Pam Galt might be ruthless, but she was ruthless in service of justice, and that made her the perfect ally. The next stop was Sarah Mitchell's office, where I signed divorce papers that would freeze our joint assets and prevent Talia from selling or transferring any property without court approval. Sarah had worked fast, filing a motion that painted Talia as a flight risk who might attempt to hide marital assets with her lover's help. "The hearing is scheduled for Friday," Sarah said. "I've subpoenaed her employment records, bank statements, and phone records. If she's been using marital funds to support this affair, we'll find it. What about the house? You can stay there until the court decides on temporary arrangements. Just don't change the locks or prevent her from retrieving personal belongings. We want to look reasonable. Even though she's the one who cheated? Especially because she's the one who cheated. Let her be the unreasonable one. Let her make the mistakes." That afternoon, I drove to the auto parts store and bought 5 quarts of used motor oil, the thick, black, nasty stuff that comes out of engines after 10,000 miles of hard driving. Then I drove to the hospital parking garage and found Rowan's BMW in its reserved spot. The scratch I'd left the night before looked even better in daylight, a jagged scar that ran the length of the car like a reminder of consequences. But that was just the opening act. I poured the motor oil under the car, creating a puddle that looked like a catastrophic engine failure. Then I used the rest to write "Homewrecker" on the windshield in letters large enough to be read from across the parking garage. It wasn't permanent damage, just humiliation and inconvenience. But sometimes, humiliation was more effective than violence. By the time I got back to the shop, word was already spreading through town like wildfire. The wrench met me at the door with a grin that could have powered the building. "Holy shit, boss. Did you really key his car and call him out in front of the whole diner?" News travels fast. Murphy's waitress is married to the guy who delivers our brake pads. He says half the town's talking about it, and the other half is asking for details. What are they saying? That it's about time someone stood up to that arrogant bastard. Turns out Dr. Hales isn't as popular as he thinks he is. That evening, I went to O'Malley's pub, the kind of neighborhood bar where everyone knew everyone, and gossip was the preferred form of entertainment. I'd barely ordered a beer when Tommy Morrison, the same Tommy who'd learned about consequences from the wrench's tire iron 20 years earlier, slid onto the adjacent stool. "Miles, heard you had an interesting conversation with Dr. High and Mighty last night. Word gets around." "Damn right it does. And word is, he's been screwing around with your wife." I took a long drink of beer, letting the silence stretch until half the bar was listening. "That's what I hear. Snake, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to let the truth speak for itself." Tommy nodded like that was the wisest thing he'd ever heard. "Need any help with that truth speaking? I'll let you know." By closing time, I'd had similar conversations with a dozen different people, each one offering support, advice, or assistance in dealing with my wife's affair. The town was choosing sides, and I was winning. I drove home to find Talia's car in the driveway and lights on in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table with a cup of tea and an expression that could have curdled milk. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought you needed space to think. I got served with divorce papers at work today, in front of everyone. Sorry about that. I asked them to be discreet." "Discreet?" Her voice rose to a pitch that made the windows vibrate. "They handed me legal documents in the middle of the nurses' station. Everyone knows." Everyone was going to know anyway. At least this way, they know the truth. She stood up, pacing to the window, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass. The same position she'd taken Sunday night when I'd asked her about the affair, but this time there was no pretense of innocence. "You bastard. You vindictive, petty bastard." "I'm vindictive? I'm not the one who's been lying for 3 months. I never meant for it to happen. It just developed. Like a disease. Like love." She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, vulnerable and honest and heartbreakingly beautiful. "I love him, Miles. I'm sorry, but I do." "Then you should have divorced me first." "I was going to. I was planning to, but then I realized how complicated it would be, how much it would hurt you." "So you decided to hurt me worse by lying about it?" "I decided to try to find a way that worked for everyone. A way that gave you everything and left me with nothing." Her face flushed red, the mask of remorse slipping to reveal the calculating woman I'd heard on the recording. "You would have been fine. You have the shop, your friends, your little life. I was suffocating here, Miles, fading a little more every day." "Then you should have left." "I'm leaving now." "No," I said, standing up and walking toward the door. "I'm leaving. This is still my house until the court says otherwise, but I can't stand to be in the same room with you right now." "Where are you going?" "To my little life, to the people who don't lie to me." I spent the night at the shop again, but this time I wasn't alone. The wrench brought beer and pizza, Tommy Morrison stopped by with a bottle of whiskey, and by midnight we had an impromptu wake for my marriage and a planning session for what came next. "So what's the play?" Tommy asked, pouring whiskey into coffee cups because the shop didn't have proper glasses. "The play is we let them hang themselves. Pam's going to destroy them at the hospital. Sarah's going to destroy them in court. And I'm going to make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of people they really are." "What if they fight back?" I smiled, thinking about Rowan's offer of $50,000, about Talia's tears and protestations of love, about all the ways they'd underestimated the man they'd chosen to betray. "Let them fight. I've got nothing left to lose, and that makes me the most dangerous man in town." The war had begun, and I intended to win it. Thursday brought the kind of autumn morning that made everything seem possible, even the complete destruction of 2 people who'd thought they were untouchable. I woke up on the shop couch with a hangover, a crick in my neck, and a voicemail from Pam Galt that made both discomforts seem trivial. "Miles, call me as soon as you get this. The board meeting is this afternoon, and you're going to want to hear what happens." I called her back while the wrench made coffee strong enough to wake anyone. "It's better than we hoped," Pam said, her voice tight with excitement. "The board reviewed the evidence last night. Emergency session. Hales is being terminated immediately, and they're recommending the state medical board review his license." "What about Talia?" "Gone. Security escorted her out of the building 20 minutes ago. No severance, no pension, no references. She's blacklisted from every hospital in the state." I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost physical. "What happens now?" "Now they try to salvage what's left of their lives while I get promoted to chief administrator. Justice served all around." After I hung up, the wrench handed me coffee and a newspaper folded to the local gossip column. "You're famous, boss." The headline read, "Local doctor terminated in hospital scandal." The article was light on details but heavy on implications, mentioning inappropriate conduct with a subordinate and misuse of hospital resources. By noon, everyone in town would know that Dr. Rowan Hales had been caught with his pants down and his hand in the cookie jar. "This is just the beginning," I said. "What's next?" "Next, we make sure they understand that actions have consequences." The first stop was the bank, where I emptied our joint checking account, perfectly legal since both names were on it, and transferred the money to my personal account. If Talia wanted to fight this divorce, she could do it with her own resources. The second stop was the phone company, where I canceled the family plan and had Talia's number disconnected. Let her and Rowan figure out how to coordinate their lives without their phones. The third stop was the most satisfying, the locksmith. "You sure about this?" Jerry Kowalski asked as he prepared to change the locks on my house. "Legally, she's still got a right to be there. She's got a right to retrieve her personal belongings with reasonable notice. She doesn't have a right to live there while she's screwing another man." Jerry had been changing locks in this town for 30 years, and he'd seen enough domestic drama to fill a library. "Your call, boss. But if she calls the cops, let her call them. I know most of them, and they know what she did." While Jerry worked on the locks, I packed Talia's clothes into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. Not her jewelry or important documents. I wasn't a thief. But everything else went into black plastic bags like the trash she'd made of our marriage. By 3 o'clock, word had spread through town like a virus. My phone rang constantly with calls from friends, acquaintances, and people I barely knew, all wanting to express their support or offer assistance in my war against the cheating wife and her boyfriend. The most interesting call came from Detective Dean Moffat. "Miles, I need to see you, now." "What's wrong?" "Just get down to the station and bring a lawyer if you've got one." I called Sarah Mitchell and met her at the police station, my stomach churning with the possibility that I'd finally crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Dean met us in an interview room, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Hales filed a complaint this morning," he said, without preamble. "Vandalism, harassment, stalking. He wants you arrested." "On what evidence?" Dean pulled out a file and spread photographs across the table. My truck in the hospital parking lot, me walking around Rowan's BMW, the scratch along the side of the car, the motor oil on the windshield. "Security cameras," Dean explained. "Hospitals got them everywhere." Sarah leaned forward, studying the images. "This is circumstantial at best. You can't prove my client damaged that vehicle. The timing's pretty coincidental. Coincidences aren't crimes." I looked at the photographs, at the evidence of my small acts of revenge, and realized I didn't care if they arrested me. Prison would be worth it to see the look on Rowan's face when he realized his complaint had backfired. "What does he want?" I asked. "He wants you to stay away from him, stay away from the hospital, and pay for the damage to his car." "And if I don't?" "Then I have to arrest you for vandalism and harassment." Sarah put her hand on my arm, a warning to keep quiet, but I was done being careful. "Arrest me," I said. "Miles, no, I'm serious. Arrest me. Put me in jail. Let everyone in town know that Dr. Rowan Hales had a man arrested for scratching his car after he got caught sleeping with the man's wife." Dean stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want to go to jail?" "I want everyone to know what kind of man he is, and nothing will do that faster than having me arrested for defending my marriage." Sarah was shaking her head, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She understood the game I was playing, the way public opinion could be more powerful than any legal strategy. "If you arrest my client," she said slowly, "I'll make sure every newspaper in the state knows about it. Local man jailed for confronting wife's lover. It'll be front-page news." Dean looked from me to Sarah and back again, understanding dawning on his face. "You're using me. I'm asking you to do your job. If Dr. Hales wants to press charges, press them, but understand that this won't end the way he thinks it will." Dean was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs, weighing his options. Finally, he gathered up the evidence and put it back in the file. "I'm going to tell Dr. Hales that the evidence is insufficient for criminal charges, but that he can pursue civil remedies if he wants compensation for the damage." "That's not what he wants to hear." "Then maybe he should have thought of that before he decided to screw around with a married woman." I left the police station feeling like I'd just won the lottery. Not only was I not going to jail, but Dean's refusal to press charges would be all over town by dinner time. The message would be clear. Even the police thought Rowan Hales was getting what he deserved. The final stop of the day was O'Malley's pub, where I found exactly what I'd expected: a crowd of supporters ready to buy me drinks and hear the latest updates in my war against the cheating doctor and his accomplice. "To Miles Rennick," Tommy Morrison announced, raising his beer in a toast that was quickly echoed throughout the bar. "A man who knows how to handle his business." I drank to that, and to the satisfaction of knowing that Talia and Rowan were somewhere across town, probably huddled together in his expensive condo, wondering how their perfect plan had turned into a complete disaster. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. The real fireworks were still to come. Friday morning brought the divorce hearing and the kind of nervous energy that comes with knowing you're about to watch your enemies destroy themselves in public. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wedding 15 years earlier, and met Sarah Mitchell at the courthouse. "Remember," she said as we walked up the steps, "let me do the talking. Your job is to look like the wronged husband, not the vengeful ex." "What if she lies?" "She's going to lie. That's what people do when they're caught. But we have evidence, and evidence doesn't lie." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick and wooden benches that had probably been uncomfortable when they were new 50 years ago. Talia sat at the plaintiff's table with a lawyer I didn't recognize, wearing a conservative blue dress that was supposed to make her look trustworthy and innocent. It didn't work. Judge Patricia Hendricks had a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency and a particular distaste for adultery cases. She'd been divorced twice herself, and rumor had it that both times had involved cheating husbands who'd learned the hard way that hell hath no fury like a family court judge scorned. "Mrs. Rennick," she said after reviewing the case file, "you're seeking spousal support, half the marital assets, and 50% ownership of your husband's business. On what grounds?" Talia's lawyer, a nervous young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, stood up and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client has been the victim of emotional abuse and financial control. Mr. Rennick has isolated her from friends and family, monitored her activities, and threatened her when she tried to seek help." I felt Sarah's hand on my arm, holding me in place as Judge Hendricks turned her attention to me. "Mr. Rennick, how do you respond to these allegations?" Sarah stood up, and her voice carried the kind of confidence that comes with having the truth on your side. "Your Honor, we categorically deny these allegations and have evidence that Mrs. Rennick has been conducting an extramarital affair for the past 3 months." "What kind of evidence?" Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder thick with photographs, recordings, and documentation. Photographic evidence of Mrs. Rennick and her supervisor, Dr. Rowan Hales, engaged in intimate conduct at various locations. Audio recordings of Mrs. Rennick admitting to the affair and discussing plans to defraud my client of his business assets. And financial records showing that Mrs. Rennick used marital funds to support her relationship with Dr. Hales. Judge Hendricks accepted the folder and spent 10 minutes reviewing its contents while the courtroom sat in uncomfortable silence. I watched Talia's face go from confident to worried to terrified as the evidence mounted against her. "Mrs. Rennick," the judge said finally, "are you prepared to deny that you've been having an extramarital affair?" Talia's lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head and stood up on her own. "No, Your Honor. I don't deny the affair." A murmur went through the courtroom, and Judge Hendricks banged her gavel for silence. "Are you prepared to deny that you used marital funds to support this relationship?" It wasn't like that. It wasn't planned." "Mrs. Rennick, this is a simple yes or no question." Talia looked at her lawyer, at me, at the judge, and finally at the floor. "No, I don't deny it." "And are you prepared to deny that you discussed plans to claim emotional abuse in order to maximize your settlement from this divorce?" This time, Talia's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, I object to this line of questioning." "Overruled. Mrs. Rennick, please answer the question." The silence stretched for 30 seconds, a minute, long enough for everyone in the courtroom to understand that Talia's silence was an admission of guilt. "I'll take that as a no," Judge Hendricks said. Mrs. Rennick, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a clear-cut case of marital misconduct and attempted fraud. Not only have you violated your marriage vows, but you've attempted to use this court system to steal assets from the man you betrayed. Talia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks that made her look like a broken doll. Therefore, the judge continued, I am denying your petition for spousal support, your claim to marital assets, and your request for ownership in Mr. Rennick's business. Furthermore, I am ordering you to reimburse Mr. Rennick for the marital funds you used to support your extramarital affair in the amount of... She consulted the financial records. $12,400. The gavel came down like thunder, and just like that, it was over. 15 years of marriage dissolved in a courtroom that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, with a judgment that left Talia with nothing but the clothes on her back and a debt she'd never be able to pay. Outside the courthouse, Sarah shook my hand with the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd just won the case of her career. That was beautiful, she said. Clean, decisive, and completely devastating. She'll never recover from this. What happens now? Now you're a free man with a clear title to everything you worked for, and she's an unemployed adulteress with a judgment against her and no prospects for the future. I drove back to the shop feeling lighter than I had in months, but the real celebration was waiting for me at O'Malley's pub. Word of the court victory had already spread through town, and the bar was packed with people who wanted to buy me drinks and hear the details of Talia's destruction. To justice, Tommy Morrison announced, raising his beer in another toast, and to the man who proved that good guys don't always finish last. The party went on until closing time, with friends and acquaintances stopping by to offer congratulations, support, and increasingly creative suggestions for what I should do with my newfound freedom. By the time I stumbled back to the shop, my house still felt too empty, too full of memories. I was drunk on whiskey and victory in equal measure. But the best was yet to come. Saturday morning brought a phone call from the wrench that made my hangover disappear like magic. Boss, you need to get down here, now. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Just get down here. I found him standing in the parking lot with a crowd of people I recognized from the bar, from around town, from 15 years of living and working in a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. What's going on? The wrench grinned and pointed to the street, where a moving truck was parked outside the house that had been mine and Talia's for 10 years. As I watched, 2 men carried out a couch, a dresser, boxes of belongings that represented the remnants of a life that had been built on lies. She's leaving town, he said, packing up everything she can fit in that truck and getting the hell out. Where's she going? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. As if summoned by our conversation, Talia appeared in the doorway of the house, directing the movers with the kind of frantic energy that comes with desperation. She looked older than she had a week ago, worn down by the weight of consequences she'd never expected to face. Our eyes met across the street, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret, or sorrow, or just exhaustion. Then she turned away and disappeared back into the house, leaving me with nothing but the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. Good riddance, someone in the crowd muttered, and the sentiment was echoed by nods and murmurs of agreement. By noon, the truck was loaded and gone, taking with it the last physical remnants of my marriage and the woman who'd tried to destroy me. I walked through the empty house one last time, seeing it not as a monument to failure, but as a blank canvas, ready for whatever came next. The phone rang as I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the life I was about to rebuild. Miles? The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. This is Dr. Patricia Wells from St. Jude's Hospital. I'm the new chief of staff. What can I do for you? I wanted to call personally to apologize for the conduct of our former employees. What happened to you was inexcusable, and I want you to know that we've implemented new policies to ensure it never happens again. I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask if you'd consider providing automotive services for our hospital fleet. We're looking for a new contractor, someone with integrity and a reputation for honest dealing. I smiled, looking out at the shop that had been my refuge, my battleground, and ultimately my salvation. I'd be honored. That evening, I sat on the front porch of my house now, free and clear, with a beer and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. Talia was gone, Rowan was disgraced, and I was free to build whatever life I wanted from the ashes of their betrayal. The fifth sleepover had been her last, and the show was finally over. But as I sat there watching the sun set over the town that had rallied around me, I realized this wasn't really an ending at all. It was a beginning.